Could Tennessee start the season 4-0 in the month of September? Could Tennessee enter the bye week 4-0 before a big showdown on the road at LSU? We're going to tell you all about Akron and Florida, plus a little recruiting at the end. This is your Friday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols, your go-to Tennessee Volunteers podcast each and every day. A part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And thanks so much for making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch on YouTube. Please subscribe and follow the show there as well. And, of course, you can find it wherever you find your podcast. Got a lot of information to throw at you today. We're continuing on with our scouting reports, our opponent previews. Akron week 3, Florida week 4, and then John Garcia is going to join the show, talk a little Tennessee Volunteers recruiting here on a Friday. Let's not waste any time, dive right into it. Tennessee will take on Akron, the Zips, coming up in week 3 of the football schedule. And I kind of went back and forth, and the more and more I research, the more and more I figure out, Akron might be, that least it might be the most equivalent to a glorified scrimmage. I know UT Martin's on the schedule. I understand that. I understand that Ball State is not a very good football team, but Akron is really not a good football team. Here it comes in week 3, Saturday, September the 17th. It'll be at 7:00. That game is going to be streamed digitally on the SEC Network Plus as well as ESPN Plus. It does have a new head coach and a head coach that knows some football. Very, very successful offensive coordinator at Penn State. Quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator most recently at Oregon, but it's Joe Moorhead, former head coach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs when he was forced out following the 2019 season. So they do have a good coach in Joe Moorhead, but I mean, you got quite the rebuild there. 2-10 was the record in 2021 for the Zips of Akron. 1-7 in Mid-American Conference, just really, really not good. Trying to avoid their 7th straight losing season is Akron here with Joe Moorhead, and he doesn't have a whole lot to work with as well. We'll get to that in a moment, but looking off where they kind of left off in 2021, offensively, 20 points per game. That was dead last in the Mid-American Conference. Your quarterback, Zach Gibson, transferred to Georgia Tech, so obviously he wasn't that good, but the best one you had last year is already transferred to Georgia Tech. And rushing yards, next to last in the conference, averaging 115 yards on the ground a game and just 3.2 yards per carry. That's not getting it done. Defensively, not much better. Allowed 38 points per game. That was last in the Mid-American Conference. 246 yards allowed on the ground per game. My goodness, if that's not one of the worst in the country, I'd like to know what is. 211 yards passing through the air. That ranked 4th in the conference, but you got to think, if you can just run it at will, then why would you throw it? I mean, Tennessee's had some bad defenses here in the last 10 years or so, and I know it was always, well, Tennessee's good against the pass, but why throw against Tennessee in those certain seasons? Thinking back to some of those Dooley teams and, even before then a little bit, but why would you throw it when you could just run it and get 5 yards a pop every single play? So not a very good defense as well. Last in the conference, Mid-American Conference, and surrendering 38 points per game in 2021. Last in overall offense, scoring 20 points per game in 2021. I mentioned that the best quarterback option, Zach Gibbons, he transferred to Georgia Tech. They do return DJ Irons. He did play in 8 games last year. He's not like a completely fresh. 8 games, 65% completion percentage, 892 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. That completion percentage is not horrible, but did turn the football over half the time he threw a touchdown. He's a big guy, 6'6", 215 pounds, and he's kind of a load when running the football as well. 309 rushing yards on 92 attempts on the season. They do return their leading returner, a wide receiver, is actually, let's see here, Tristan Banks, 25 receptions, 269 yards, and 3 TDs. So Tristan Banks comes back. He's their leading receiver. Leading rusher is Jonzel Norris out of the backfield. Running back, 571 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4.9 yards per run. And they hope to count on Minnesota Golden Gophers transfer Cam Wiley to help supplement some of that running game as well. As an offensive line, gave up a nation's worst 57 sacks in 2021. So as an offensive line, 57 sacks given up, and they return only 2 starters. Not very good there. No player recorded more than 1.5 sacks defensively last season, so nobody was getting after the passer as well. They do return a linebacker in Jez Lord Boating, 80 tackles, 4.5 TFLs. They return a safety and Jalen Kelly Powell, 73 tackles, who was second on the team. And their top interception getter with 3 came from cornerback Charles Amanakwana. And he had 3 interceptions, where the team as a whole had 6 interceptions in 2021. Akron, next to last in the country in opponent third down conversions in 2021. We talked about defense, the third down struggles for Tennessee in 2021. It wasn't this bad. Akron, next to last in the country in opponent third down conversions in 2021. So needless to say, Akron, you never want to count anybody out. You never want to put a W in that column before it happens. Georgia State, things happen, right? Akron, this will be nothing but a glorified scrimmage. The last tune-up, a dress rehearsal before Tennessee takes on Florida the following week, before Tennessee takes on its SEC schedule. That is what this game is. And point blank, we're just not even going to spend much time on it at all, because it is what it is. 2021, worst scoring defense in the Mid-American Conference, worst scoring offense in the Mid-American Conference. New head coach, quarterback that started, transferred out. Horrible against the run, not very good running the football either. This is just a bad football team. Tennessee needs to use this as a tune-up, as a dress rehearsal, and get things going in the right direction come September 24th, which is that game against Florida. We will touch on that game against Florida here in just 1 second as we move on here on this Friday show. Got a lot of great things to get into. Remember, John Garcia is coming up in segment number 3, so really, really looking forward to that as well. But we're going to talk Florida, how important that game is, but really, who are the Gators? Who are the Gators and what are they bringing to the table? That's coming up here in just one moment. But let me tell you about my friends over at betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your sports betting needs. Find all your favorite sports events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every single league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline.net continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, podcasts. They've got you covered. Head on over to BetOnline today or use that mobile device. Learn about all the latest trends and all the action happening right now. That's at BetOnline.net. It is where the game starts. Welcome back to Locked On Vols. It is your team every single day, and of course, your team is the Tennessee Volunteers. A massive, massive football game. Week 4 of the season, September 24th on a Saturday. No TV destination yet. No time for this football game. But as we continue on with our scouting report, let's head to Tennessee's biggest rival, arguably, and that is the Florida Gators. Obviously, Florida, huge game. We've talked about the importance of this football game. Why? Well, Florida's owned Tennessee in this series. They've won 16 of the last 17 football games in this series. It's truly incredible when you think about it, because Tennessee's been the better football team in a number of those games, several of those games. Should they have won every single game? No, but Tennessee's been blown out as well. Tennessee was blown out by Florida last year, in fact. But Tennessee has not been the worst team in 16 of those defeats, I can tell you that. But that's kind of that mind hurdle. Rebuild for Billy Napier, first-year head coach, as I pointed out tons and tons of times. We talked about this so much throughout the offseason. This is a massive football game for Tennessee, massive. But we're going to dive into who is Florida this year, who's going to make that engine run, and what should Tennessee be prepared for. We know how important this football game is, but here's a little bit on Florida. Last year, 6-7, Dan Mullen was fired after a record-breaking offensive season the year before with Kyle Trask. But 6-7 was the record in 2021. In comes in Billy Napier from Louisiana. Quarterback Anthony Richardson. We know who Anthony Richardson is. He is going to be playing in the NFL likely after this year. 6'6", 240 pounds. Big boy. 38-64 last year, 529 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. and he threw for 4 touchdowns in limited work. 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So that is not a very good ratio there. On the ground, he had 401 yards on 51 attempts. He averaged 7.9 yards per attempt. So obviously, again, he is a load on the ground, but not very good passing statistics. The last 2 years, he split time with Emory Jones. Emory Jones is now out. He is transferred out. It is Anthony Richardson's ball club. But he lost the leading wide receiver for the Gators last season, Jacob Copeland, who transferred to Maryland. You did bring in wide receiver Ricky Pearsall from Arizona State, and he finished with 48 receptions last season, 580 yards, and 4 touchdowns. You do bring back Justin Shorter, 41 receptions, 550 yards, and 3 touchdowns in 2021. Here's an interesting nugget on Billy Napier at Louisiana. Louisiana had 4 players that recorded a 100-plus carries in 2021, and that also includes the quarterback for Louisiana. So Anthony Richardson's going to run the football an awful lot. 4 players who recorded 100-plus carries on the season for Louisiana in 2021. So I would expect a heavy workload in the backfield for a number of different guys. Running back Naquan Wright is the leading returner on the ground for Florida. He had 76 attempts, 326 yards, and a touchdown. You brought in also from Louisiana. A couple of these transfers followed Billy Napier from Louisiana to Florida. Running back Montrell Johnson, he had 838 yards in 2021 with 12 touchdowns as a freshman. Florida returns 3 starters on the offensive line, including another transfer from Louisiana and a guy that's been getting some all-SEC love here in the preseason, guard Osiris Torrance. The defense for Florida in 2021 gave up 26 points per game, so wasn't horrible, wasn't fantastic. That was 10th in the SEC. 164 yards rushing on the ground is what the Gators surrendered. That was 9th in the SEC. So not your typical Florida numbers, not offensively and not defensively as well. Brennan Cox, the defensive end, 8.5 sacks last season. That led the team. He's coming back. He had 14 TFLs in 2021. Big boy in the middle, Jervin Dexter, defensive tackle, a massive human being, plays A-gap to A-gap, if you know what I'm saying. 51 tackles and 2.5 sacks. Looking for a lot more production from him in the interior on that defensive line is Florida. Linebacker Muhammad Diabates. I don't know how to say his name. I apologize. But he was the second leading tackler on the team last year, and he's out. He transferred to Utah, so they're missing another linebacker, but they do bring back a guy that missed the majority of 2021 in the linebacking ranks, and that's Vontrell Miller. Really nice player. He was the leading tackler for the Gators in 2020 with 85 tackles. He's coming back, had a torn bicep in 2021, so that was a huge loss for that defense, and Florida's expecting him to play an awful lot. Safety Terry Dean, once upon a time, a Tennessee football commit. Terry Dean led Florida in tackles a season ago with 92, and I say this all the time, whenever you have a defensive back leading your team in tackles, that is never, ever a good sign. You never want that to happen. But he's a 3-year starter, all right? And he's a guy that's played a whole lot of football. He had a couple of interceptions last year as well. You do return cornerback Rashad Torrance, 87 tackles. That was 3rd on the team last season. He had a team-high 3 interceptions. And so that's kind of about the personnel grouping of what Florida and what you can expect from the Gators in that regard. Here's the thing about Florida. First 2 games of the season, they started the first 3 games of the season, actually, 3 home games before they head up to Knoxville. So coming to Neyland Stadium, the first road game of the season, and that environment at Neyland Stadium, I'm expecting Florida to be shook just a little bit. Going up against that tempo, there's the potential there for Florida just to get smacked in the face. Think about it. Tennessee would already, and I mean, it's not an SEC environment, but Tennessee will have already gone on the road and played a game at Pitt by then, right? But Florida opens the season at home with 3 games. Utah, Kentucky, and then USF. Florida very easily could be 1-2 coming up to Knoxville. Wouldn't that be something? What if Florida lost to Utah in the opener? What if Florida lost to Kentucky, which is very likely? Kentucky's beaten Florida twice in the last 5 years. What's that record for the Gators coming to Knoxville? That's something to keep an eye on. A very challenging first part of the schedule for Billy Napier in his first year. So that's a little bit about the Florida Gators. It's not going to be a horrible team. There's still talent on that roster. There's still a lot of talent on that roster, a lot more than what people are giving them credit for. But as we've said repeatedly through the offseason, the importance of this football game, get over that mental hurdle that Florida's just got your number. It's like Tennessee and Kentucky. Tennessee has got Kentucky's number. A lot of times, including last year, in my opinion, Kentucky might have had the better football team, especially on that night, and Tennessee found a way to win. Credit Tennessee for making the stop there towards the end. Defensively, when you made only one other stop all game long, and that was with a pick six from Alontae Taylor. Tennessee's got to win this football game. If not now, then when? Because Napier's going to get Florida going. He's going to recruit well. He is recruiting well down there right now, and he's going to get Florida going and humming. And the Volunteers need. I'm not saying the Volunteers will not be able to beat Florida in next year, the year after that, and all that. I'm not saying that, but Tennessee needs to beat Florida this year for obvious reasons. And if Tennessee wants to start September with a 4-0 record, head into that off week, that bye week, and then head on the road down to Death Valley to take on the Tigers of LSU with an undefeated record. This is such an important football game. Pitt will be a tremendous challenge in week 2. Florida will be a tremendous challenge in week 4. One game is away and one game is host. So that is home. That is your scouting reports on Florida. And, we'll see what Billy Napier has in year number 1 for the Gators. So when we get back next week, we'll continue on with our scouting reports, take a look at Tennessee's opponent previews. The off week comes after Florida, and from there on out, it's going to be some tough sledding for sure for Josh Heupel once you get in that month of October. But that is why you play the game. All right, we got John Garcia, recruiting director over at SI. He is coming up next here on Locked On Vols. Going to ask him about a couple of cornerback commits, Ricky Gibson, Jordan Matthews, what's to come for the University of Tennessee. Already 21 commits, and guys committed, but Tennessee's still swinging away. Who are those guys, and what are the chances Tennessee can get some flips on down the line? We will ask John Garcia. All that coming up right here next on Locked On Vols. Welcome back into Locked On Vols, your team every single day. One final segment left on this week of shows, and it's going to be a good one. We got John Garcia coming on to talk a little recruiting, and of course, John's recruiting coverage is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Thanks so much, LinkedIn Jobs, for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions always apply. John, what's going on, man?
Doing well, Eric. Good to be on with you. And yeah, consider me one of those people shocked by Tennessee, contending with and beating Texas in the end for Jordan. That was as big a defensive back win as we've seen. And again, we talked about on this show, this defensive class at UT is really strong. We all expected all this offensive fireworks, and there's a lot of it there. But man, I really love the defensive group in particular that this coaching staff's put together.
I mean, it's really, it's kind of mind-blowing because, when Tennessee was able to get Nico back in March, kind of like the Arch Manning effect. Who wants to go play there? Who wants to go block for him? Who wants to catch passes for him? And it's not like Tennessee wasn't in a lot of these races. Of course, we know Carnell Tate and, Francis Mauigoa and all that, some big 5 stars. But it's really been interesting because the firepower outside of Nico in this class is on that defensive side of the football. Pass rushing has been an absolute priority with Caleb Herring and Shandavian Bradley. Of course, they got Christian Conyer, who Tennessee values as the top player in the state of Kentucky. Jordan Matthews, Ricky Gibson, Sylvester Smith. I mean, that secondary looks good. What do you like about, or give me your thoughts about Jordan Matthews first and foremost? He went quiet on everybody, and a lot of people thought he was going to Texas, chooses Tennessee. But from the get-go, I was, we were kind of being really consistent saying that Tennessee's still in this. He might not pick Tennessee, but Tennessee was very much in it. And then lo and behold, he picks the Volunteers.
Yeah, behind the scenes going into it, we were talking to him at SI All-American, and we thought we were going to do a commitment interview with one school. He was like, well, just in case, can we do it with another as well? And we're like, yeah. And Tennessee was that other school. So we're like, okay, the Vols are definitely in this mix more than we thought. And then he tweeted out the video with him in the UT hat and stuff. And I'm like, is this
looked like a commitment video, right?
Yeah. I was like, I thought it was the other day, so it's just been kind of a great lead in to his decision, which is what you would expect from a Louisiana guy, competitive bootleggers, 7-on-7 guy, and Jordan Matthews, who we really like as a defensive back, a true cover corner, a balanced player who really stays within the frame of his body. Not something we talk about enough from a cornerback evaluation standpoint. We see guys who run really well and flip their hips and all that. And Jordan does all those things, but really I like the structure that he plays cornerback with. Absolutely great at the contact point when the football arrives towards its intended target. He's got good length on him as well and has that instinctual nature to just poke without actually, wrapping up or getting a PI call. So there's just this nice balance to his game, whether it's athletically between speed, length, and his base, or in his decision-making, which again is at corner is really important. This has become a position where you're no longer measured by, hey, how limited did you create the opportunities for the receiver? It's more about touchdowns, first downs, moving the chains, and making plays on the football. How can you limit that? And I think that's where Jordan is really, really special. His instincts when the football is en route are really among the best in the country, and that's why he's an SI 99 recruit for us, one of the top corners in America that we've seen and loved on tape and in person over the last 12 months or so.
We got our guy John Garcia on here to talk a little recruiting, and this is all made possible by our friends over at LinkedIn, the official college football recruiting sponsor across the entire Locked On College network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. And of course, terms and conditions do apply. Ricky Gibson. I think he's a really nice player. Not the highest rated guy, but Georgia wanting to finalize that secondary wanted Ricky Gibson. He was to take at Georgia. I think it speaks volume that he probably wants to see the field a little faster, of course. But he chose Tennessee over Georgia when it's all said and done. What do you think on that?
Yeah, all these secondary players you've talked about. I mean, major wins against pretty marquee opponents head to head, it seemed like, right? Conyers over Kentucky, the in-state school. We just talked about Jordan Matthews over Texas. Sylvester Smith had Auburn, Georgia, a lot of schools, clamoring for him at that time too. Just interesting head-to-head wins for UT against some of these programs. And yeah, Ricky is another one. We all have heard about his speed, right? We've all seen it, read about it, watched it at this point. Really great wheels. But, when you watch him on tape, that's not the first thing you notice. I actually like his ability, his quickness. His quickness shows up on tape before his overall long speed does. And that is a great trait for a cornerback in this day and age. Because again, you talk about how sophisticated these routes are getting, how hard it is just to play that position. It's harder every year, it seems like, because of the rules. But his ability to redirect and be quick, I think, is something that really stood out on tape. And that explosiveness, of course, translates to the ability to make up ground and create some physicality in run support and tackling in general. So those are other elements of his game I like. But again, the quickness really struck me in watching his tape this spring and going to see him this spring over at Hewitt-Trussville. There's one play in particular, Eric, where he's in a zone concept. So he passes off a receiver and then someone flashes in his zone. So naturally he breaks up to neglect that passing lane, but then it's a double move. And he's so quick that he redirected simultaneously with the receiver. And then, of course, just outran him to the football and ended up being an interception in the end zone on an out and up. But you just see the instincts, the quickness, the decision-making he makes, and then the speed all on one play. It's a great one-play eval if your audience can jump on his tape. And I think that's where you see some really nice qualities with Ricky. Of course, the speed is great. The length is there. He'll fill out the frame just a little bit more here as time goes on. But those natural traits are really good. And you throw in the competition level. I mean, that's 7A ball in Alabama, the very, very highest of levels. In his region, he's got Thompson High School. He's got Hoover. I mean, it is murderer's row from a high school perspective in the state of Alabama, in that Birmingham area where, of course, football is so great. So he's seen it all. He's covered SEC receivers in practice over his whole career at this point, and he sees a bunch of other ones on Friday night. So you like that from a floor perspective with this kid as well. So big fan of these two commitments. Again, I really love the secondary Tennessee's put together. All those guys can run. And I should have mentioned John Slaughter as well, head-to-head with Ole Miss. So all these marquee wins and all these guys can really play, and they kind of complement one another. I think their styles are all a little bit different, which is exactly what you want in the secondary to combat these crazy receivers and offensive passing games that you see in the SEC and everywhere else.
You look at Tennessee's class now, I mean, of course, it's not done. The board is very small because you have 21 commits, but you'll start reevaluating that senior film. There'll be new names that pop up all the time.
Yep.
You got to get more. A transfer portal is still an option, but you got to get more defensive tackles, got to get more offensive tackles. What more do you see from this class kind of down the line over the next few months leading up to December?
Yeah, I think the trenches are the clear focus for me when I look at this class. Your secondary is pretty much done at this point. Wide receiver looks pretty good. You could probably add another running back if you want, but certainly the trenches is where you need the beef. Whether it's interior defensive linemen, as you mentioned, or certainly offensive linemen, I'd say across the board, but definitely tackles, something that Tennessee really needs to jump in on the rest of the way here in looking at how this group is constructed. There's going to be some turnover there on the current roster, but you also do feel comfortable in the fact that you can, like you said, allow some seniors to play their way into it. There's some guys that are on the bubble right there on Tennessee's board, and with where Tennessee has to recruit well, right? Atlanta Metro, Alabama, in-state, go east to North Carolina, even into South Carolina. In that footprint, you will see guys play their way into SEC consideration. So I think you can allow a little bit of that in trying to construct the remainder of this offensive line. And as you teased earlier, you could always combat some targets that maybe have come off the board to other programs, which is certainly something we would expect Tennessee to pursue specifically at that position.
Yeah, the last thing here, so some of those guys, last thing here with John Garcia, Lucas Simmons, Tennessee's going to swing until December.
Yeah.
A tackle they like, tackle they were in on. Lucas likes Tennessee, especially depending on what's the situation if there's a coaching change there. How easy, would it be for him to flip? I think that's one to keep an eye on. Fellow commit Keldrick Falk, Tennessee likes him an awful lot. Hunter Osborne, you're going to keep swinging at. Tamarian Parker, a former Penn State commit, decommitted. When he said that he liked the weather up there, everybody said, well, red flag. He's not going to stay committed up there. Roderick Robinson is a guy Tennessee's going to continue to swing at. Recruiting's always fluid, and I know you don't have the answers to this, but is the path there just to keep calling until they just don't take your call anymore?
Yeah, 100%. I think with Lucas in particular, a kid I'm real familiar with. Look, Tennessee finished second here, and it was a very close second in this race. I know Florida Gator fans and a couple other fan bases won't like it, but it's true. I mean, Tennessee from January, I thought Tennessee did the best job with Lucas. Now, Florida State earlier than that really created some separation, right? He's an international kid, but he's playing in Florida. So I do think that they had the advantage of the end of last season and the very beginning of this offseason to really create some distance. And they did that to their credit. Alex Atkins is one of the best O-line recruiters in the country, and that's their strongest position group in this class of 23. But there's no doubt that Tennessee from January on hit the gas with him about as well as any school could have. And I think that's why they were able to contend and nearly went out for the commitment the first time. So yeah, you have to keep recruiting these players. Another SI-99 recruit where, you could see things changing, right? I mean, Florida State is unstable at best at this very moment. I don't know if there's a win total out there, but when you talk about, hot seat or any of that stuff, it absolutely affects these recruits. So if you're targeting a Florida State or a Nebraska type of recruit, Auburn certainly in that conversation as well, you start targeting those guys and there could be some potential movement. Now that's strategy, that's business, that's the business of recruiting. You almost have to prepare for it to a certain degree. So I do think that's a prospect in particular where you keep recruiting. But yeah, I think the door could be open with several kids who are verbally committed at this point because it's still August. The season is still totally in front of them. And if Tennessee on the field does what we kind of think they're going to do and really push in that SEC East and make positive impressions, all that stuff can continue to push and help the overall optics of maybe changing some recruits' minds. So I do think that you got to play that game as long as you can.
John Garcia, his recruiting coverage brought to you again by LinkedIn, helping find the candidates that you want to talk to faster for your jobs. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. John, what you got coming up there on the site this week and over the weekend?
Yeah, just a lot of build up towards the season. So we're doing some preview stuff, some freshmen we expect to make pretty big collegiate impacts right out of the gate in 2022. And then, of course, a whole lot of recruiting drama still ahead. 20 SI99 recruits uncommitted right now. One just decommitted last night. So we're still tracking the very best in this class of 2023 over at SI.com.
Awesome stuff, John. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me, Eric. Take care.
All right, again, that is John Garcia, the director of recruiting for Sports Illustrated, and a big shout to LinkedIn for making it all possible. All right, that's going to do it here for this edition of Locked On Vols. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Vols your first listen each and every day, your first watch on YouTube, and it's a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every single day. Guys, enjoy your weekend. We'll do it again on Monday. If you haven't already, please subscribe and follow the show on YouTube. Rate, review, like. Throw me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, all that and more. And, hey, same time, same place. We'll do it again Monday, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. And we'll talk again next week.